Think about two different people, let's say Aaln and Bob, and they're both working $50,000 jobs, and each year they get a 5% increase on their salary. And let's say Aaln at the very beginning of his career asked for a $3,000 raise, and they both continue to work the same jobs for 10 years, and they keep getting that 5% increase year after year. How much would you guess the difference would be between Aaln and Bob's salary? It would end up being a $5,000 difference in their yearly salary, and even more shocking than that, after 10 years, the total accumulated earnings between the two would be a $40,000 difference. Comment down below if you found that shocking at all. And so what does this example teach us? It teaches us that even a small little difference in salary early on in the beginning of your career can end up being the difference between paying a Tesla in cash or not even being able to afford it. One of the best ways to boost your income in a relatively short amount of time is to job hop. And there are certainly pros and cons to job hopping, which I'll explain in this video. Hopefully by explaining the pros and cons to job hopping, not only will you know how to do it, but on top of that, you'll better understand whether or not it fits your career needs. To start, what is job hopping and why should you job hop? Job hopping is where you spend about a year, no longer than 2 years at a certain company, and then you leave that company to go work at a different job because it pays a higher salary. If my company only gives me a 2% increase in my salary every single year, perhaps I could find a job out there that gives me a 3% boost in my income. And in 1 year, I've already made a 1% increase in my salary that wouldn't have happened otherwise had I stayed at the previous company. In fact, I just recently had a discussion with a friend that worked at the same company for almost 10 years. Anytime that this employee asked for more than the standard raise, he was constantly rejected. He got contacted by a competitor that offered him $5,000 more than his current salary. He ended up accepting the offer, but then his current company that he was still at caught wind of this situation, and then they offered him $2,000 more than the other company was offering. So at this job where they never budged or had any wiggle room as far as giving raises to him, all of a sudden they were willing to give him an additional $7,000 in his salary in just 1 year. And to be fully transparent, he ended up telling that competitor that he needed a little bit more time to think about it because his current employer was offering more money. The competitor said, "Don't even worry about it. We'll beat that offer by $3,000 more." So now, just from that one job hop, he's actually making $10,000 more in a short amount of time. And like I've been explaining, over time, that $10,000 increase will dramatically shift his life. In fact, once again, if we assume that the person keeps working for 10 years, and let's just say that they had a 5% increase in their salary year after year, they not only would be making $16,000 more per year, but their total earnings for those entire 10 years would be a difference of $150,000. So what are the good and bad as far as job hopping? Well, let's start with the pros of job hopping first. Well, the obvious pro to job hopping is that increased boost to your salary in a relatively short amount of time. And on top of that, you don't necessarily even have to change jobs or career paths to do that. Just like in that scenario I explained, you can use job hopping, or at least a threat of job hopping, to your advantage to help boost your salary and get a better pay raise. Another potential pro is that companies out there only have so much money to give for raises. If the majority of people out there are job hopping, then your company has to use more and more money to get on those new hires. Then that's less money set aside for you, and that's less money for your raise. So even by not doing anything, you're losing out by not job hopping. Now, job hopping does obviously have its cons too. Given enough time, you could actually job hop so much that you actually hit a cap as far as your total earnings. Let's say someone ends up getting a job at 20 years old and is making $50,000. And every single year they end up job hopping to a new company and end up getting a $10,000 pay raise by doing this. So after just 5 years, this 25-year-old is now making $100,000. So at this point, if they try to job hop again, they're going to have a tough time trying to convince someone that they're worth $110,000 with only 5 years of experience. Or even more so, after enough job hops, companies are going to begin to notice that, and rather than hire you, they're going to hire somebody else that's less likely to job hop. So you could end up in the situation where you can no longer job hop anymore to a new company to boost your salary, but yet the current company you're at isn't necessarily a company culture that you enjoy. Or another consideration that may be important to others is that by job hopping, you're not necessarily building any type of relationships with your coworkers. Another potential problem too is that if you end up getting laid off or you end up getting fired altogether, then when you try to apply for a new job, your resume may not necessarily look so great because of all the times you job hopped. And there are certainly ways to explain job hopping as far as the resume and interview process, but I'll explain that in a separate video. Now, in the end, job hopping is certainly your own decision, but by understanding the different cons that are out there, you can better assess if it's the right fit for you. For me, I believe that job hopping is a great tool to help boost your income, and I don't necessarily worry too much about the long-term impacts. You see, the whole trend of job hopping is actually becoming more and more common, so employers are becoming more and more used to it. A good example of that is many companies out there would give a golden watch for anybody that was employed at the current company for more than 30 years. But now a lot of companies have done away with that because they realize that most people don't necessarily care about staying at a company too long. And as far as company loyalty and feeling feeling guilty for job hopping, I like to keep in mind and tell others to keep in mind as well that a company would not hesitate to fire you if you weren't necessarily bringing them too much value. You could have all the company loyalty in the world, but at the end of the day, it is a business and they're trying to make money, so if you're not bringing value, they're definitely going to fire you. I'd also say you have to consider the long-term skill impacts of job hopping. Most jobs out there have a huge learning curve early on as far as the first couple of years of their employment, but given enough time, you end up just having routine daily tasks and you don't necessarily learn too much afterwards. When you think about your long-term goals as far as your own career path, having a lot of skills is probably essential to getting to those top positions that you're striving for. So by job hopping, not only are you getting the short-term benefits of a boosted income, but on top of that, you're getting the long-term impacts of gaining more skills. You could also make the argument too that by job hopping, you end up becoming a more well-rounded employee. If I work as a salesman at a used car lot, that may end up helping me get a job as an account manager for an engine company. Now, by having an understanding of engines and also having a background in cars, I may be able to be a production supervisor at a car manufacturing place. Then, given enough time and enough job hops, you end up having so much knowledge and a well-rounded knowledge that it qualifies you for those top tier positions. A lot of different heads of companies, especially the CEOs that are really the top tier performing ones, they end up having a pretty well-rounded experience and they understand the entire process of what they're handling. Now, obviously, job hopping has its limitations, but it isn't unheard of people having a degree in a completely unrelated field and working at a certain position and even becoming a manager in that position. Now, at the end of the day, there aren't necessarily any promises as far as job hopping, and you don't necessarily know what your own path will end up being. But that's also kind of the exciting thing about job hopping, is you're creating your own career path rather than just fitting into a career path that you've seen time and time again of other people going through. I feel that a lot of people end up having unique traits and characteristics to their own life, and they want to express their own individuality. So by job hopping, you end up having a set career path, but you kind of explore it in your own way. If you appreciate this video at all, please consider giving this video a like. And if you like personal finance, business, or economics, or any of those topics, please consider subscribing as well. And as always, hope to see you in the next one.